Welcome back, friends. Welcome back to the Corbett Report. James Corbett of CorbettReport.com here, and I hope you remember that, even though I have been gone fishing for the past week, as I noted in my past video. But yes, I am back, recharged, refreshed, more raring to go than ever, and boy, do I have a doozy of a conversation for you today, and I say that advisedly, because today I'm going to be talking to an old friend of mine, and I mean that in the sense of a longtime friend, not in the sense of an old man. A longtime friend that I have known for, I think, a decade at this point, namely Tjeerd Andringa from Groningen in the Netherlands. And if that sounds familiar to you, then you are paying attention, and you will remember that we have talked to Dr. Tjeerd Andringa before on the program, and actually, you might even be well-versed enough in Corbett Report lore to know that I believe, I'd have to double-check this before making any definitive claim, but I think, Tjeerd, you might be one of the only people to be featured on the Best of the Corbett Report as an interview role, not once, but twice. Because if you go to CorbettReport.com/best-of, you will find that our conversation on the Kakistocracy is in that best of, and also our conversation on Narcissus and Goldmund from Film Literature in the New World Order is also on the best of list. So you have cracked the top tier of Corbett Report material, not once but twice. A no mean feat, I would dare say. So hats off to you. Tjeerd Andringa, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. All right, let me start with just a little personal anecdote here. I literally just today, and not in any sort of conscious plan, but I was going through some of my 2014 material in prepping the 2014 data archive USB available for soon from newworldnextweek.com, and I discovered some of my old interview footage of you, in fact, including some unused footage that I took when you were taking a trip through Japan at that time, which I had forgotten about. You actually came to Japan, and you were passing through, and we went to a little community center where I'd rented out a room, and there was a whiteboard, and I took some footage of you, and I used that in a couple of reports. And I had forgotten that interview even existed. And I also came across the footage of my TEDx presentation, and on a lark, on a whim, I checked that presentation on YouTube to see if it is still up there on the YouTube page of TEDx Groningen, and I discovered that it is still there, but now it sports a note from TED in the comments of that video. It says, "Note from TED, we've flagged this talk because it falls outside the content guidelines TED gives TEDx organizers," which I actually take as a badge of honor. I think that's a great thing. And yes, for anyone who's ever wondered, how did James ever get to speak at a TEDx event? Well, first of all, TEDx is technically separate from TED, but also, yes, it was Tjeerd Andringa, the esteemed professor at the University of Groningen, vouching for this no-name from Japan. Who's this guy? Okay, well, if you say so, Tjeerd, we'll bring him on. And all these years later, it's been flagged by TED. Yay, is all I can say. But anyway, yes, the esteemed professor at the University of Groningen, Tjeerd Andringa. Oh, wait. Are you still affiliated with the University of Groningen? I think we need to fill in the blanks of the past few years for people who haven't been following your career.
Well, in terms of my career, it stalled. The University of Groningen decided that I was too toxic a person to be a member of the community, and I was officially cancelled. There was a lawsuit at some moment in which they honestly said that people with the beliefs that I had, and they were not specified. That's really important. They were not specified at all what beliefs. But that someone with my beliefs could not be a member of the University of Groningen. So apparently people whom you don't know the beliefs, but you simply dislike or that make you uncomfortable, they can fire you. And I was not really fired, actually. We agreed that we would separate on the basis of conflict on the purpose of education. And that conflict was actually pretty simple. The university said students exist to serve the university. And I thought the other way around. The university exists to serve the students. So the conflict was about what is central, the development of the individual mind of the student, or the learning outcomes that the university requires of people. That they show basically that they jump through sufficient number of hoops, and if they have jumped through the hoops, then they are worthy of a bachelor or a master degree. And I for some reason, I think that intellectual maturity has something to do with university education, and that made me probably an unwanted and pretty toxic person.
That is a particularly baffling story to me, because I had the honor and the privilege of visiting you at the University of Groningen, seeing you with your class, in fact enjoying a traditional Dutch hodgepodge with your class, and doing Q&A with your students afterwards.
Yep.
And so I did get at least a small slice of seeing the interaction between you and the students. And I say this as someone who spent some time in academia and was I've been in a number of classrooms. I would be hard pressed to think of. Let's put it this way: I would certainly put you in the top 10 percentile of any interaction that I've ever seen between a professor and students. To the point where, yes, clearly you're an authority figure who students can turn to for questions, but you did not in any way talk down to students, at least in the way that I saw you interacting with your students. You treated them as capable, responsible adult human beings who could think for themselves, and I certainly didn't ever see any evidence of you shoving anything down anyone's throat or berating anyone for believing something you didn't believe or what have you. So it's truly perplexing, at least from my perspective.
Well, yes, from your perspective, of course, but from a university perspective, not. Because the mere fact that I don't push content down the throat of my students makes me a problem. And of course, there is a role for showing that you are able to do a certain trick. But there is also a big role for showing that you can think independently and that you can formulate your own arguments independently and using the best knowledge that academia can provide. So for me, that is central. And actually, I take my students very seriously. And it appeared, and my mother-in-law had written that down in 2017, that I had said to her that I didn't expect to be a member of the University of Groningen until my retirement, because the level of my students is higher than the level of my colleagues. Yeah, so that is, well, that clearly indicates, and it's not for every colleague, of course. Let's be sure there are still really good academics, but there are also people who seem academics, but who consciously or not so consciously ignore a lot of high quality knowledge and make a story based on a so-called academic story based on ignoring a lot of high quality evidence. And for me, those are not academics. I mean, if it is an oversight and you discuss with them and they include the knowledge, okay, that's all fine. But if it is blatantly ignoring whole fields like biology or whatever, doesn't matter so much, then you're not an academic in my eyes. And students are definitely not doing that. And I flatter myself, well, the students flattered me actually, with extremely high teacher evaluations. I had teacher evaluations well above a 9 out of 10. And that had to do with the mere fact that I took them extremely seriously as developing minds.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all to hear. I only had that small window of opportunity to actually witness it, but the rapport that you had with your students was truly, it certainly seemed like a good, healthy rapport. Unfortunately, all it takes is one or two people who have the wrong impression on the wrong day of something that they didn't like, and their feelings got offended, and we can see where that can end up in the snowballing process of cancellation. Now, people might think that this conversation is going to be dwelling on this point, but actually, let's take a hard left turn, because we're not here to dwell on that particular aspect of your interesting career trajectory. What we're actually focusing on, of course, is, yes, a critique of academia as it exists, as it is structured in the institution of the university. But more to the point, actually, well, what can we actually do about it? Because, yes, we can elaborate the problem till the cows come home, but the cows still have not come home. So let's do something about the problem. And unsurprisingly, again, given everything that I know about you, you've decided to actually do something about this problem, specifically in the creation of something called the School of Understanding, which is available at school-of-understanding.nl. Don't worry if that's a mouthful. It will be linked in the show notes, as always, so that you can go there directly and start learning more about what this School of Understanding is. And specifically, at the top, it says under the educational concept, it says, a School of Understanding is a teaching concept designed as a small-scale, decentralized, effective, and cheap solution to the problems of our current schooling. Here you learn to develop your worldview into a reliable basis for adulthood. All right, sounds simple enough, but obviously there are quite a few details in there that need dwelling on and elaborating, so let's start doing that. Tjeerd, what is a School of Understanding?
A School of Understanding is intended to be the smallest, cheapest, simplest alternative for a big industrial, bureaucratic university education. And it is, I'm designing it in such a way that it is easily portable, easily copyable. So basically, any decent academic any decent academic should be able to start a school like that. And in doing so, educate people for a year, typically, and typically adolescents, by the way, for a year, and then they become the academics. They learn a bit. They are active in the world, and then they can start their own school and do exactly the same. And the idea is to have a small group, say about 10, 12 people. The reason for that is that I can follow 10 or 12 people in quite detail. I can't follow 25 anymore. And help them create the best basis for adulthood, intellectual basis for adulthood that we can think of. And that is the tool basically to develop your worldview in such a way that it becomes ever more realistic. And why is it important to have a realistic worldview? Well, that's very simple. Every plan, every idea that is not realistic will be proven wrong. And it will not be proven wrong by other people. It will be proven wrong by reality. So the more realistic your ideas, the more successful you will be. This is really simple, really important. So then the next question is, how do you make your worldview as realistic as possible? And then we come to how people build worldviews in the first place. And what seems to happen, and I've experimented with this with my students a lot, and they agree on this, that this makes a lot of sense. We first accept worldview building blocks as narratives, as stories from the in-group where we grow up in. And so we hear a story on how the earth functions, how society functions, who our enemies are, what our religion is, etc. All those building blocks, and they are typically topical, and they might overlap a bit, but they can only overlap when they are not too much interfering with each other, and they are building blocks that you accept as a whole, and that is the important thing. Well, at a certain moment, you have your basis, your worldview basis, and then you come into a new process, and that process is called refining. So the first process is building. And in refining, you typically discover that there is knowledge outside of your in-group, and high-quality knowledge outside of your in-group. And then you are going to to integrate that knowledge in your own knowledge. And then you discover that there are all kinds of inconsistencies that part of your old knowledge is actually not of the high quality that you hoped it would be, or that you thought it would be. And then you learn from the outgroups. So sometimes, by the way, the outgroups are wrong, of course, and then you discover that. And then all your narratives, they start to merge, and they have to become more consistent with each other, and they have to become more consistent with reality. And that process, refining, is the process that I did a lot in my courses. So I exposed people to narratives that were typically say at 90 degrees to, not necessarily opposite, but a completely different perspective on any topic. And then the students discovered that was reasonable people talking in all kinds of reasonable ways, forcing them to adapt their worldview a little bit, and learning a little bit, and making their own worldview a little bit more consistent, more realistic. And that gave them a really good feeling, and also the feeling of that they had learned an awful lot in a very short time. Although it was not the typical way of learning, like learning for an exam and cramping everything in memory, so that and after a few months or so, you hardly remember anything that you needed to pass the exam. That is exactly the other type of learning.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think one of the things that you're gesturing to is a fundamental difference between what we might think of as learning, by which I think we generally mean rote memorization of key dates and figures and facts for regurgitation on command or in test or essay format, versus understanding. And I think understanding brings with it a certain sense of mastery. When you truly understand something, you can actually produce something within that realm of expertise, and it is that production that speaks for itself. It is the actual thing that you are after. You are not after a degree. You are after actual understanding and mastery. But also that process by which you achieve understanding is itself a transferable skill that you can then use in different domains.
Exactly. And that is the reason why the school is called the School of Understanding. The word understanding comes from the Old Frisian word understanden. And that means basically to support from below, which is to build a foundation. And so the School of Understanding is helping people to build a very solid foundation for their future. And because I'm a university level teacher, so I know a lot about adolescents. And that, for me, the main contribution that I can deliver is to help make people to have the building blocks, let them coalesce, let them merge, and weed out all the inconsistencies, everything that is unrealistic, everything that is spurious, and go to a higher level of understanding. So a level of understanding in which 5 or 10 processes that formerly looked completely separate are now manifestations of the same. And if you understand the world in that way, your fragmented worldview starts to become less fragmented very rapidly. And that gives you that solid basis for adulthood.
Right. I mean, that's another sign of understanding, when things that were formerly disconnected are shown to be interconnected, and that you can actually not only detail, but actually make decisions that will affect outcomes based on the understanding of those interconnections that previously were opaque. There's some very, very important points being made here, but I guess one of the first questions that occurs to me, you speak of a school of understanding. I'm not familiar with the pedagogy enough. Is this a term of art? Is this a term that has been used in the past? Is this something that you've created out of whole cloth? Is it some admixture of the two?
There are some institutes that are called schools of understanding, but they don't have this particular pedagogy. What do you say?
Pedagogical.
So I'm not really a neuroscientist. I'm a cognitive scientist. So I know a lot about.
Can you detail the difference for us laymen?
Oh yeah. Maybe I should say something about my past. I studied physics first, and after I started physics, I was asked to start a study called applied cognitive science. And cognitive science is a kind of a generalization of psychology. So it's not necessarily about humans. It is about everything that reasons, including artificial agents. And that program became artificial intelligence. So I was the director of artificial intelligence for a few years. And there I studied a lot the difference, or the question actually, is there a difference between artificial intelligence and natural cognition? Do they overlap, or is the overlap only partial? And what I now think is that the overlap is only partial. Artificial intelligence is able to do able to work only in a closed domain. So you define a domain, and you find and within that domain you can see all kinds of structure. If you open the whole thing, then we have no tools to deal with that anymore, and that is the domain of natural cognition, and that is the domain actually not so much of problem solving, which has to do with intelligence and artificial intelligence and natural intelligence, but the domain of problem prevention, and that is a really important thing. And problem prevention is actually a very good approximation of the word wisdom. So if you're a wise person, you are able to prevent your problems. And if you're a really capable person, then you're able to prevent most problems. But if they occur, and of course they will occur, then you can solve them quickly and efficiently. So you have both well-developed intelligence, but probably an even better developed problem prevention. And that this was also a lot, but what we were talking, what I was talking with my students, and it made a lot of sense to the students. So I'm spending a lot of time on the cognition of problem prevention, and that has everything to do with understanding, like you said, and especially you prove your understanding by not messing up. And you disprove your understanding by messing up. Intelligence agencies have a nice name for that, blowback. Yeah, when they do all kinds of things, but they don't understand really what they are doing. And after a few years, they are confronted with all the negative effects of everything they did, and that only gave maybe a temporary positive effect.
Well, as a conspiracy theorist, I would say that blowback was invented as a way to disguise the true intentions, which is to actually do the things that blew back. Of it. But I get your point. But yes, the point is well taken, in that problem prevention really, as a sort of a proximal way of measuring wisdom, is actually, I think, a really good way of looking at it. Or at the very least, knowing what to do in positions of problem when problems arise. For example, if you happen to be a university professor and you suddenly find yourself disconnected from your university, you create your own school. Why not?
Yeah, so easy. And you create something that is manageable. The really important thing, you don't want to recreate the university again. Yeah, so you basically want to go to the complete opposite on every dimension that makes no sense whatsoever. So, for example, the thing that really annoyed me about universities is that the use of learning outcomes, which entails that at the end of the course, you have to prove that you satisfy the learning outcomes by making an exam and doing that exam and showing that you know everything and that you master the learning outcomes. So you jump through lots of hoops, and then a year later you hardly remember whatever you knew. So this is wasting student time. It's wasting valuable student time, because this is in your easy learning years, and you're just it's evaporating, and you're also actually wasting student time. No, you're wasting teacher time, because they had no true benefit of all the courses that they gave. And so I see this as well, one of the worst things of our current universities. So what am I doing? I'm doing exactly the opposite. So we have every week a number of topics, and that I select them as the teacher, and maybe in part they are selected by the students. And then the students, they read them, they do something with it, and some part of it they might find interesting. If they find it interesting, they have to develop it to something that is consistent, that is realistic, that is connected to other knowledge, that is maybe contrasted to other knowledge, other ways. And when they are satisfied with, and when I, as a teacher also, am satisfied that this is a decent depiction of this particular topic, and at an academic level, then only then you have to memorize it. So the students decide what they want to memorize, and the students, I want them to be in the zone of proximal development. You know Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. That is, well, a Russian researcher who basically said that if students are interested, then with a little bit of help from a teacher, they can learn almost effortlessly. And by the way, even without the help of a teacher. So whenever you're interested, you're in the zone of proximal development. And that makes a lot of sense. So when are you interested? If you encounter something that is new enough to be interesting, but not weird enough and disconnected enough to be off-putting or whatever. So you are in that zone of that you can barely grasp it, but you know there is some value, and that is the point where I want my students to create knowledge themselves, of which I am only the quality control. And the moment they have created that knowledge, they are going to make a few flashcards. And you know the system with flashcards, that is, if you want to memorize something, this is about storing stuff in long-term memory, not so much in short-term memory. But you can also use flashcards for short-term memory. Anyway, so the idea is you have created some knowledge yourself on a particular domain that you find interesting, and you write pointers down to that domain, to the knowledge, on a card, and we do it in a computer. And when you look at, you review the cards now and again, and every card has a side with a question. If you know the answer to the question, and the back side has the answer. So if you already know the answer easily, then you put the card on a pile that you will review in a week or so. If you have difficulty with it, you put it on a pile that you will review the same day or the day after. And that way, you sample all the knowledge that you create. And I want students to create about 50 flashcards every week. And so with 40 weeks, if we do this a year, we have 2,000 flashcards. Those are pointers to the knowledge that you have created. And with 2,000 knowledge bits to the knowledge that you have created, you are building connections from one domain to another domain, because you will also create flashcards that connect, say, psychology to economics or physics to whatever, and that helps you to create an integrated worldview. And so the idea is create your own knowledge. Don't forget it. You will not forget it because of you will using flashcards the whole year, and that activates the knowledge that you have created every time you see this thing. At a certain moment, you have created new knowledge in whatever domain. you are activated by the flashcards of knowledge of a previous domain 3 months ago. All of a sudden, you see a connection. You create a new flashcard, and you have a new connection, but now between two completely different domains. And what you want to do is to change a lot of your knowledge from knowledge that is on the level of I know that the Earth is circumventing the Sun, to I know why the Earth is circumventing the Sun. Yeah, so, and that is the difference between just memorized fact and examined knowledge.
Yeah. And you've just upset all the flat earthers in the audience. But
oh yeah, well, sorry for them. No, not necessarily. I'm not sure what they think about. But anyway, we can try to make a case for the flat Earth, whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. Try to make the case. So here's, I guess my questions about this are to do with the practical way, the nuts and bolts way that this actually looks. So you've already stipulated something around the range of 10 to 12 students, something like that. And I assume there will be a set schedule of some sorts, but this sounds fairly self-directed. So I'm assuming it's not everyone goes to a classroom every day to sit down for an allotted amount of time. I'm assuming there is some different way that you have structured the work week.
Yeah, the week looks, well, in this case, on Monday, we meet and we discuss. I introduce all kinds of new topics every week. The topics they develop, and they have a lot of connections, but students will not necessarily see those connections. At least not in the beginning. And then we discuss, well, for example, I can give homework about a documentary. And I used a few of your documentaries. The Rockefeller one was always a success because students there discovered that there was a completely different level of political influence that they never thought about. And well, so I use a documentary, and students typically have to write a mini essay of about 300 words that makes sense to them, and it has to be to make sense to me as well. And it should not. It's not intended to please me. It is intended to show that they are creating knowledge themselves, and I help them make that better and better and better. So that is to get them in their zone of proximal development. Another thing that they have to do is develop ideas, develop self-created ideas from fragile and unformed to pretty robust and well supported. So that's the difference between an opinion and a position. A position is like, in military terms, a position is a place that is fortified, that you can defend well, and a position is also aware of the enemy, and it takes and in this case, a position is aware of all the different ways of looking at it, and typically a position uses the best knowledge of your former intellectual adversaries to improve your own ideas. And therefore, your intellectual adversaries, they become your teachers, because they are the ones who can actually improve your ideas. And, well, we do all kinds of other things, like little debating games, or but the main thing is addressing all kinds of different forms of knowledge. Some about health, some about psychology, some about physics, some about this, some about that, and history, and creating and allowing students to use all that knowledge to improve their world view, and to make it more consistent, and to produce that understanding basis, that foundation for the rest of their lives in 1 year.
A manageable, easy task, right? Well,
yes.
I'm assuming it would take a very certain type of student to really thrive in this environment. But before I get into that question, I guess the other question I have would be with regards to the I mean, again, there's no set curriculum from what I'm understanding here, but presumably these mostly self-directed interested students would have their field of interest that they're specializing in and looking into. Are you presuming to be able to direct students in anthropology and psychology and economics and Japanese calligraphy and whatever other interests that they would have, or are there a certain set of topics that you would imagine steering them through?
Until now, I'm always surprised that I can definitely follow or direct my students on pretty much any topic on three or 1, 2, or 3 steps, mostly 2 steps. Yeah, so they are interested in something. I know something about it. I lead them to a particular source, and they learn from that source, and then they have new ideas that are a little bit more mature. I can still help them a bit, and then it become difficult. But there are definitely, of course, are topics that I don't know anything about, like Japanese calligraphy. But those are not normally the topics that students come up with. So when they come up with normal stuff, I have usually explored them already. But it is important to say that suppose a student comes to me who believes that minerals influence people's behavior or people's feelings or so. And then it's not my task to convince them of the opposite. It's my task to ensure that they can make the strongest damn case for this idea. And so I will lead them to high quality esoteric material, and I will help them to make a really strong case of that.
I would assume that part of the point of this, assuming that we do want to help these young people attain their sort of adult independence, is for them to be able to seek out and identify competent authorities within the domain that they've chosen, and then test themselves against those competent authorities in some way.
Exactly. That is really important, and it's your mind. You are the one who should make decisions on what to include in your worldview. And I, as an academic, it's my task to ensure that process goes maximally efficiently, and with the highest quality knowledge that humanity has produced. But it's their mind. So I will not say how it should be filled. And at university, I really have the idea that the mind is seen as a kind of a storage box in which you dump everything that the university deems fit to be stored, and then it evaporates also. While for me, the mind is much more like a house where everything has a place, and everything is decided on consciously. It's not a way to dump information. No, it is something to be extremely careful of, and to organize really well, and to make it maximally functional.
All right, so as I alluded to earlier, I think certain types of students will thrive and really get something out of this. Other types, this may not be for them. What type of person or student do you think would benefit most from the School of Understanding?
I would say in general, everyone who is open to knowledge, really open to knowledge. And who feels that inner drive to self-develop, and feels that it is very natural to develop your autonomy. I don't think there are many more things. Yeah, they have to be decently smart, and they have to be able to read some pretty complicated stuff. And not that I'm going to expose them necessarily to pretty complicated stuff, but high quality thinkers tend to produce pretty complicated stuff. So you need to gain access to that. But apart from that, I would say that decently smart, open, super interested, people who want to be critical on their own minds and who want to develop their own autonomy. That those are the people that I typically want. And there are definitely a lot of parents who are a little bit in our world, who have children with whom they have been talking about all kinds of topics, and who hardly fit in normal university life anymore. Or maybe they fit in, but then they have to, they really have to, how do you say that? Degrade themselves a bit so that they fit again into the university system.
If only there had been a school of understanding when I was deciding whether or not to pursue my academic career, maybe things would have turned out differently. But then again, I'm glad that they turned out the way they did.
Well, would have lost an important person, an important voice, maybe.
Well, who knows? Maybe I could have developed it earlier. But at any rate, all right. So at the end of this year, the student will walk away with a little piece of paper that says that they are accredited and approved by some state institution in the field of blah, blah, blah. Oh, probably not. No. What do people walk away with at the end of this?
I have to think about that. I think it makes fair to give them something. But one thing, for example, that I was thinking of is they created those flashcards, and those flashcards that we do that in Obsidian, and you can organize them on tags, and you can organize the text in a circle, and you can make a nice visual representation of that of all the knowledge and all the connections between the different knowledge types that they have. And that would be actually a really nice thing. So and then they can hang that on the wall and say something.
Or if it's in Obsidian, they could publish it as a website, and it could be like a CV.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if I would do that. I mean, I wouldn't like to publish the contents of my mind on the web. But. So that is definitely something. Another thing is that I think it should be possible to organize. I take a few friends that I consider true academics, and we are going to have a discussion. And it will be a discussion that will be pretty hard, but it will be on the topics that the student has developed. And then
something along the lines of a dissertation defense.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the student discovers that, damn, I am able to converse with those pretty smart, well-developed individuals. And those individuals are then going to say, you're part of our club now. Yeah, so, and that is actually how a bachelor and a master was supposed to be. So
this is what it puts me in mind of, the old sort of apprenticeship system, rather than what it has developed into, which is essentially accreditation by an establishment institution.
Yes, and the weird thing is that now you get a piece of paper at the university that hardly means anything. And in my case, you get no piece of paper and it means something. Yeah.
All right.
So
yeah. Again, my understanding, this is a general concept, and as you say, it's a decentralized idea that presumably could and hopefully will be applied in many different places around the world and adapted to different situations, etc. But you are going to pilot this idea, and my understanding is the first course is not started yet, but you are about to undertake that?
I have a few students now. I need some more. So you can apply if you are within traveling distance of Groningen. And I will keep it to, say, maximally 12. But then this year, I hope to develop a lot of material. And I want to get into contact with people who might like this. And might want to start this in a similar way and develop also material with them. and then create something of a community. I'm not sure how, maybe via Patreon or Subscribe Star or whatever platform that is suitable for that, and then create a basis to copy basically what I have developed in this year, and that includes also, say, the student file. So you have to keep track of what students are doing, and you need a lot of material, and you need also to prepare yourself for that material. In my case, I've doing courses like this for something like 8 years now, so I have a lot of material that is suitable for that. And say you are an academic, you worked in a company, or you had your own company, and you think this is something that I would love to do. You need to develop material, and you can reuse a bit of mine, but it would be probably better if you develop your own material, or make whatever material I produced your own, and then we create a whole bubble of material that can be used in this way. And there is, I think I have a lot of knowledge on how to organize this in so that it makes sense for the students, and that we go from fairly easy stuff to really complicated stuff. But I'm currently not yet, if someone asks me, how do you do that? Then I can't give a proper answer. Yeah, so that is something that I have to develop this year.
Understandable. I think this is probably the type of thing that develops in the course of actually doing it. I don't think it's the kind of thing you can plan out every detail ahead of time. But that's part of the point, isn't it? All right. I know strangely, the Corbett Report audience has a strangely strong contingent of Dutch within it, which is, I say strange because a seemingly small country with presumably not native English speakers, but there seems to be a lot of Dutch Corbett Report listeners. So hopefully there will be some people in the audience who might be interested in taking you up on this course. If there are, how would they find you? How would they get in touch with you? How would they sign up?
Well, go to the website, www.school-of-understanding.nl. See whether the first page makes sense. It's a lot of material already there. And at some point, there is an email address and where you can apply and ask for more information. I am also interested in a small amount of, not really venture capital, but investors, to have someone help me organize this and do Kickstarter. I can do this without the investment, but it helps to have people who help organizing this. So, but that's all. It's all pretty simple, and I want to keep this, of course, really simple. I don't want to create a new bureaucracy. I want to do exactly the opposite.
Yeah. And for people who are not in the vicinity of Groningen and not in a position to help you financially, at any rate, I hope people will at least take a look at this idea and see how and if it can be applied in your own area. I think there are some valuable ideas in here about the process of not teaching, not learning, but understanding, which I hope we have started to flesh out in this conversation. I'm sure we could talk about this for many, many more hours and still not even begin to really get back past the surface level of the depth of this subject matter, but I think this will probably do it for today. But Sjeerd, is there anything else about this School of Understanding or these concepts that you'd like to iterate before we go?
No, not really. I'm really looking forward to it. I love working with the students. I missed that a bit in the last couple of years because of me being cancelled. And that was also the only thing that I missed of the university. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to restarting this and spending some time with really eager, interested young people.
Excellent. Well, I am very interested to hear how it goes, and I'm looking forward to updates on this in the future. So my hat's off to you for not letting the cancellation affect you and just to continue doing what you do. In fact, to do it even better. I appreciate that. I think that's an example we can all learn from. I think we'll leave the conversation here for today. Cheered Andringa School-of-Understanding.nl. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.